In today's podcast interview, I'm talking to Samantha Gash. She's the founder of Her Trails. She's also an endurance athlete and she's an inspirational speaker and just overall amazing human. I thoroughly enjoyed talking to her. We dove into the depths of understanding sort of self-awareness, diving into discomfort and finding a way to really find your rhythm in the pursuit of whatever targets and goals you have in a way that you can be self-compassionate, you can be self-aware and really enjoy the process in a way that makes you better and you feel good in the process. We went all sorts of different ways and approaching this with really no agenda, I think really showed through. I think you'll thoroughly enjoy it and hopefully enjoy it as much as I did. There's a ton in here and she's an amazing human that we'll definitely be talking to again in future. So if you are a driven human that's looking to improve your life in any way, this is the podcast to listen to. What got you from that corporate lawyer space to now what you're doing?
I think my background, very abridged, is I don't come from a very sporty childhood. I definitely saw myself as maybe small and definitely not strong. I am just under 5 foot and found that coordination in sports wasn't something that I excelled at school. And therefore I kind of put all my energies into kind of academics and creative side of things. So I only found like running, mainly because it wasn't a team element. I didn't think I'd let anyone down if I wasn't good enough. I found it in my late teens, but then early 20s. And then I decided to kind of challenge myself and do this bucket list, do a marathon and then kind of focus all my attention back into law. And it's not like it was this romantic story of an incredible marathon. It was actually quite brutal. And I got to the 32-kilometer mark, like so many people do. And it was the most I'd ever done in training. And I was internally screaming to find a way out of that. I thought it was pain at the time. I now think it's discomfort. And I like to consider that discomfort is a sensation of a feeling that we're not familiar with. And I had never felt what it was like to go over 32 Ks. And the point of safety, meaning 42.2 Ks, still felt a very long way off. And I was in overwhelm. Yes, physical, but I think mental overwhelm with that unfamiliar space. I think what happened to me after getting to the finishing line is I saw how great I felt to complete it. And I realized how close I was to not getting to that place. And it made me realize how few things that I do where I don't know what the outcome will be. And that doesn't mean that I wasn't successful. I mean, I was studying a double degree in performing arts and law. I was about to take my graduate position at Baker and McKenzie. So tick, tick, tick. But what I wasn't doing was thrusting myself into environments where the pathway was not clear and maybe the end destination was even less clear. And I think it's not easy for anyone to be on the unknown, but why it seems maybe easier for some people is because they have repeatedly done it. And even in the space of ambiguity, they have enough self-confidence that they will find a way through it, even if it's messy. And I did not have that in my early 20s. And I literally spent the rest of my 20s to my 30s and, now to cultivating a sense of peace in the unknown. And yes, I've done it through trail running, but I've also now done it through setting up my own business and doing work in the social impact space and becoming a mum. It's the biggest unknown adventure of your life. And so it kind of translates on the trails, but also off the trails.
Amazing. No, I love that. We always make a lot of associations between business and health and really seeing that by focusing on that. I love your breakdown between pain and discomfort. I want to go back to that. But looking at sort of what's challenging the body physically is also having that mental impact and knowing that you're leaning into something that you don't know how far you can push, but simply the pursuit of challenge is going to have some ripple effect somewhere is such a cool way to look at it. Can you break down why you find that important, but with the whole discomfort versus pain, why is that a block or why is that something worth highlighting?
Okay, so we'll go to the pain discomfort.
Yeah.
I mean, people don't want to hurt. For the most part, I think after a while, I've then met the opposite, where a lot of people only feel like they're being successful when they're hurting. And it becomes almost like where people get hardwired to think, oh, that's only where growth is happening. And I've become a lot more nuanced at this place in my life where I'm like, no, no, like you can't always be on the edge. And a lot of people seek it because maybe it's sexy or I'm going to take every single challenge, but it's actually the dance between broadening out the foundations of well-being, broadening out your sense of safety and security and stability, and then consciously choosing when to leap, but then also having enough of a foundation that you can leap when you are kind of required to, not of your choosing. And kind of being able to oscillate between those two states is far more challenging than people realize it. It's like a life pursuit for me to work out. Like there's no such thing as balance, but it's like my balance between those two areas of life. And I am someone that's typically all in, but you can't leap off shaky ground. And so if someone's telling me, hey, I want to do a 50K or whatever it is for them that is so unfamiliar to what they do, I do first ask them, like, what's your sleep like right now? What's your quality of, consumption, social, nutrition, like all those different elements of what we consume into our lives that also play a role in how we show up to the challenges. And sometimes people want to challenge because those things aren't right and they want to shake things up. But I just think you give yourself a much better chance of success, whatever success might be for you, if you can get that platform steady first, because that also gives you confidence in yourself. Like if you can't master that, how do you think you're going to master the unknown? And I catch myself not getting it right quite regularly. Like recently I found myself, I think I did a post about it this week where I had a lot of series of like kind of little micro setbacks. None of them on their own was that bad. But as the day wore on and all those setbacks, kind of accumulated, I found myself snapping in my interactions with actually someone who was trying to help me. And like my fuse was tight. And I walked away from that. And, people aren't perfect. Humans are volatile and emotional and irrational, and it's okay to be all those things. But I do think as a part of being a good human, as a leader in business, a leader in your community, a supportive member of whatever family construct you have, is reflection. And reflecting how you showed up in one moment versus the version of you that you're proud of. And what's most important for me is how you bridge that gap and how you repair, often like maybe externally, but also the repair within yourself. Like if you're not showing up the way that you want to the big challenges of your life or even the micro moments of your everyday, nearly always it's rooted in something of your foundation you're not doing right. And for me, it was actually, I was not having good sleep. And it was this, it sounds so simple, but it's like, if you are not sleeping well, quality or quantity, your cognitive capacity is pretty low. Your ability to deal with, the problems and challenges that will come up in your life will be limited. And like socially, you won't be able to cope well. All of those faculties are important in the unknown, in crafting these big challenges of your life that, yes, give you growth, but if you can't deal with the uncertainty and the setbacks in the unknown because you're not looking after yourself, it makes it harder. And that's when people fray and get overwhelmed. You get high rates of anxiety and overwhelm and potentially even depression, sense of disconnection, loneliness. And so like, I just like the holistic balance of, yes, seek extension, seek the evolution of who you are, but don't abandon like the basics.
Yeah, it's a really nice way to sort of lean into the details or the awareness of sort of the unknown in the middle. And I really love your explanation of that. A version that we use in our world is like if the mind says no, there's probably a level of like a bit of a nudge and like let's lean into discomfort. If the body says no, then we get to a space. So the brain says no,
Yeah.
lean in. It's probably like I want to feel comfortable. If the body says no, I probably need a rest, or I didn't sleep that well, or I haven't fueled the body, or whatever that might be. And I think just being in that space where you're able to decipher the difference between the two and sort of lean into, okay, I know how to tackle my mind in this scenario. I know how to see where I'm going to have these tendencies to be a bit more comfortable, and it's not going to help me move forward, versus getting a little bit uncomfortable and leaning in. And as you've already explained, you've clearly seen a lot of people in both, where there's some people that you need to apply a brake pedal for results, and then there's some people that you need to apply an accelerator for
Mm.
results.
Yeah, and that's how fascinating are humans. Like
Mm,
that we can sometimes sabotage ourselves for growth because of maybe a bit of insecurity, or we are rooted in some invisible rules that are holding us back.
yeah.
And other times we are so hardwired to be thrusted into the edge because we feel like that's what's living about, that a bit of stability can actually really serve you well. And I think it's everyone's individual journey to start to get intuitive
Mm.
and kind of like question what's impacting your intuition to be able to work out, when you're going too far or when you need to push it. And I actually think experience is the best way. Like sometimes actually burning out, like the flip side of it. And like I'm a realistic optimist. So like if something bad happens, it's like it is an incredible lesson for future growth. Like cultivate failure. It's don't abandon it. Don't be shamed about it. Go like, what can I learn for this that can serve me next time? And so like if anyone on your podcast here is listening and has experienced high overwhelm, anxiety, burnout, like kind of start to write down the patterns that have created those scenarios and realize that you actually got a really great blueprint of what your thresholds are. Now, your thresholds can be improved 100%, like our capabilities can grow, but it gives us a really good framework to determine like how to go the next time.
It's in like a coaching environment, you can see that, I guess those patterns externally really easily. How do we do that in regards to seeing those patterns come through, right? Because I could maybe identify a pattern for you and say, hey, you have you
Yeah.
seen this come through? It's obvious me. And you're like, oh,
Mm.
I haven't even thought about it this way. Yet sometimes when we're in the moment, it can take 6, 12, 18 months or longer. And then you're like, damn it, I didn't realize that was a pattern. Have you got
Mm.
any techniques or ways that you personally go through that, just like leaning into some level of, I guess, observation of how that day or how those patterns are coming through?
Yeah, you miss it because you're living life. And
Yeah.
so you're in like, and particularly if it's like acute emotions of like overwhelm, it's so real to you because it's your lived experience that you can't take a step back,
Mm.
which is why sometimes other people can see it, but they also might not know the factors that got you there. So they might be able to tell you, you are clearly burnt out right now, but they may not know what was the sequence. The only thing that determines the sequence is if you start to journal stuff. And so like, we do it a lot with women relating to their cycle. And some women say like, oh, I'm getting these really bad headaches. And I was like, do you know when you're getting those headaches? Like some people just think I'm chronically always getting headaches. But then when you start to document, you realize, no, these are happening kind of like a couple of days before my period. And because they're so intense when they have them, they almost, and because it's crazy how a month comes around really quickly and it can last several days and the after effects of it can be terrible as well. So you're talking about like maybe a week, a month where you're getting the headache and then the after effects of it, that it feels like it's all the time. And so knowing that is like, okay, well, maybe I need to be kinder to my body during this time. Like maybe that's when I need to increase my fluids and my electrolytes. Maybe it's when I don't do heavy weights because the tension that I'm putting on my neck and shoulders is causing more tension around here when my body is going through that cycle change. And it's the same across the board. Like I think there's a lot of people who actually put up with quite a bit of pain, and they think it's okay, or they think it's normal because they are training. But the reality is we have to start to understand what is normal kind of, yeah, you're training, you're pushing body and your muscles are tight. But what is also something that I should be paying a broader attention to, because I shouldn't be feeling constantly fatigued. I shouldn't be feeling anxious and on the edge all the time. So there is like mental side effects and physiological side effects. And so we try and talk about those. And it's like that's when you need to see professionals who can kind of like help you digest some of the data that you create, and then they can kind of help you with that.
Yeah, I love that you went there. I was about to go there with the female cycles around exercise. It's really like the most empowering thing in the world, from what I've heard. I haven't gone this
Yeah.
through this
Yeah.
in regards to why am I feeling weak at this time of month? Why am I noticing that this other time I've got so much more drive, and how do I harness that? And
Mm.
that's kind of the wrong way to be like, how can I wrap this up in a pill and use this all the time? It's like, no, there's kind of an acceptance towards a period of time where you know you can push and a time to repair. And if you can kind of consolidate that into your month, it just gives you so much more clarity, I'm assuming, on how you can kind of approach your training in different ways.
It's crazy how, like, women, my age and older, like, and even like 10 years younger, grew up not even knowing anything
Yeah.
about this and not
Yep.
realizing how many shifts our body is going through, let alone the shifts that women go through during perimenopause and menopause.
Yep.
During perimenopause, it's like your entire body is going through an absolute reboot. And you wonder why women who are in perimenopause, who may not even realize that's what's happening, feel like they're going crazy, told that they're crazy, start to get treated differently in the workplace, don't get opportunities for promotions, and it totally cripples their self-esteem and self-worth. If only they realized what was actually happening and they found ways of communicating that to the people in their life, and they could feel more honest without shame to talk about it.
Yeah,
Um,
we've even in the last week or two, I've had two discussions with ladies where they've gone to the doctor and the doctor have said, no, you're not in perimenopause. There is no single test that tells you if you're in perimenopause or not, and those symptoms can start up to 12 years beforehand, right? So understanding where some of these changes, like the big three we talk about, is one, okay, if estrogen is lowering, then we're seeing a drastic change in how we use carbohydrates, right? That whole I don't feel like my body's utilizing as well. I can't focus as well. If progesterone's dropping, there's seems to be really interesting, but some big changes towards how you tolerate stress and even
mm,
types of training you're doing. I'm sure you dive into this quite a bit, right? Like
mm,
starting to understand, like if I'm always in zone 3, zone
mm,
4, I can just feel broken and hungry all of the time, as opposed to feeling like I'm moving forward. And then, of course, testosterone has a pretty interesting impact on, where you hold body fat, and it's done to shift towards your waist. And we sort of break that down quite a lot with women a lot. And I think, as you mentioned, that sort of trust and the intuitive nature of being able to lean into what your body's actually telling you, and then approaching that, in both your work as well as how you're approaching some of your fitness targets.
totally, they come together. You Perimenopause can like go for over 10 years,
Yeah.
and it can go quite early for some people. And then menopause is a day. It is like a year plus a day after you have not had your period. And actually, things in menopause are a lot more stable. It is the perimenopause phase that is very complicated. But then the problem is, if perimenopause has been so horrific, how you see yourself in menopause can be really challenging. But the thing is, if you know how to service her and look after her and actually get rest, we recently brought in who I consider her like a perimenopause expert. Her name's Dr. Kirsty Holland, based out of Melbourne. But she literally said to our community, you cannot sleep and rest enough in perimenopause. And in fact, we have like 80 to 100 women do this race in the Blue Mountains last year, and we will also again this year. And last year, the race, our slogan was fatigue is expected. And like everyone had it on their t-shirts and I loved it. But this year, the slogan, or for 2025, the slogan's going to be the race was won in bed. And it's like, but isn't that kind of like fascinating how at different points and seasons of your life, like there's different mantras that serve you. And yes, it's great that women are learning more about honoring, their monthly cycle, but also like I think everyone, and men and women, need to honor the season of life that they are in now. And there are a lot of people that are harsh on themselves because the version of them now feels so different to the person that they used to be, whether how fast they used to be run, how much they could lift, how much that they could do co-curricularly. And then or they go like, I want to be this different version of myself that I hope I can be there in a couple of weeks' time, but I expect that of me now. And I was like, what if we let go the past and the future and like embraced with pride this person that's trying a challenge or trying to make a change now, and like lean into that, because that's what holds people from getting started, when they like think they should be something else. And also it's what kind of stops people once they get started to get to the finish. So it's like, I think, the age of, people 40 and above, like self-acceptance is so vital to still live a really full life. and your full life will look different. And wholeheartedly, like, you can seek so many challenges, but if you don't get that like mental infrastructure right, you won't start things or finish things.
Yeah, it's such a great space. And, for so many people, the concern of, what you used to be able to do 20 years ago holds you back from simply starting now. And I think, as you said, it's sort of the stop trying to get back to what you were 20 years ago, like start to rebuild the version of you now. And I think there's that whole, sort of be where your feet are, present nature to things that you're bringing through here, which I really like. This sort of
But
ties into what,
also, but also
around.
being proud of the version you are now. Like, sure, you might have had to have, you couldn't really do any training for the last 6 months because you've been trying to work hard in your job, or you're dealing with the challenges of your teenage children. And what do they say? Small kids, small problems, big kids, big problems. But you've had to problem solve so much in all of those non-physical sporty activities. You bring that as like this badge of honor to like whatever you're dealing with now, and realize it doesn't have to be like experience for like. And you can cannibalize like all those incredible experiences off, the training spectrum, but bring them into you as an athlete now. And that's how you can cut time dramatically. You really can. You can use those things and go, oh my gosh, like, I have got some superpowers. Like, I have dealt with some shit recently, and I am still standing, and I'm still seeking to grow. Like, I think everyone should be so proud and privileged to be in a position where they even think that's possible.
Yeah, the power or someone in your life to be able to highlight that there's an association between the skill sets you already have, right? Like you have an amazing attention to detail in this space. Imagine if you applied it here, or you have an amazing ability to show up when you don't want to. What if we applied that here? Or some version of that kind of virtue that I think can be highlighted and then sort of bridged into the area you want to improve. It's a really powerful space to sort of build up that confidence in an area that you may not feel as confident in right now, right? And we see that a ton where they may feel really confident in the workspace, right? And they're
Yep.
putting in the reps every day. They feel that it's a space they know really well. They jump into a gym environment or going for that first run, and as you mentioned, it's just the complete unknown. But
Yeah.
that sort of backing of what you can achieve in other areas, you can certainly associate that. That's a cool way to look at it. The area I want to sort of tie back to was this concept of physical versus mental discipline. And
Mm,
I really love your thought process so far, but for me, it wasn't really real for a while until because I had all these sort of physical pursuits through rowing and triathlons and all these different sort of like doing hard things, right?
mm,
And there's a lot of sort of health experts out there saying like you need to be more disciplined. But if I look back on that now through what I've been through, it was like, well, that was never really discipline because it's something I enjoyed. Therefore, I looked forward to it all the time. Right. So, like true discipline and being able to have those hard discussions with yourself in that moment, it becomes really different when it's something you don't enjoy doing.
yeah.
And I got thrown off a motorbike, broke a lot of stuff, couldn't train the same way, and very much was forced to look at managing both emotions and just general life stuff in a very different way than what I was doing before, right? And rather than it being a physical pursuit, really sitting in that space of either meditation or journaling or really chewing through thoughts and what was way more uncomfortable for me, and being able to look at that as actually a much better version of building discipline for me then
Mm,
allowed me to get better in both once I sort of rebuilt, right? And I think being able to look at that for you, I've seen plenty of clients now that I've been through that, I can now see it.
mm,
Hence why I asked the patterns question, allowing myself to see, well, you actually enjoy exercise and that's something you actively lean into. Yet in this space of you've had an argument with your partner, so you're out the door going for a run, is there a different way of addressing that? Or are you noticing that you're able to really sit in that space? And it becomes a coach in my world that says, are you being the warrior or the monk? And sort of the ability to have both because you want to be multifaceted there and the ability to apply those different personalities in different environments. And just yesterday, if you're in that CEO role at work, being efficient with tasks, and then you come home and then you try to be efficient with your wife, how did that go? And I got a big old laugh, right? So being able to apply these different versions of yourself in different environments and sort of notice, the ability to build the skill set, I think is quite helpful.
well, yeah, and it's emotional intelligence, which is the most underrated leadership skill.
Yeah.
What is appropriate to work with your team in the office possibly might not be the same style that you want to apply at home, as well as the fact that each of your team are unique individuals and they are driven and wired by different things at different times. And the reality is, like, to know the people that you're working with will always allow you to execute your emotional intelligence a lot more. And then the interesting thing is, like, I think a lot of people mask, and they mask. I mean, I speak about a lot from the female perspective, but it applies across the board. People mask because they want to be liked by people. They want to be deemed as credible. And somewhere along the way, they've got a version of themselves or what has a created credibility. And what happens is then people don't show as their true, authentic selves. And the reason why there is a detriment to that is because every single person actually has a really incredible offering that is probably very different to everyone else. But if people get to hone into their unique offering, you can move the needle so much quicker. And it means that people who are maybe not so good at something, but they haven't really made that clear, are working double time to get that deliverable done. And what if you just knew that that person in your team is shit at numbers? And why are we getting them to do the budget every single month? Like, they're doing it, but like, you're wasting that person's skill set and time, where if you could pass that on to someone else in the team that actually just gets that, and you give this other person maybe more of a creative task, which they're incredible at. And I have definitely moved away from this idea of that you should be good at everything. And people are like, you could always, like, develop your skill sets. And sure, but isn't there power in just knowing what you're really great at and getting even better at it, and you enjoy it, and there is like levity to your life, and you get to show that skill set off to a team that really values it because it complements the skill sets of other people in your team. But that only gets fostered in teams that feel safe with each other. And so, yeah, I do a lot of work in the corporate space. It's about like developing like really harmonious teams of synergy. And it helps you hire people as well, because you actually know where the gaps are within your team, that you go and then seek that out versus seeking another carbon copy because, hey, we like everyone to be like this. How boring.
Yeah, it's following the template that was set out before rather than using your own brain. It comes back to the same intuition piece. So I think, in order to have that awareness of people around you, you probably need to have a bit more awareness of self,
Oh,
you know?
I know. And how hard, because we're changing all the time. So
Yeah.
it's like, that's the most fascinating part about it. Like, leaders, the quiet leaders, the ones that listen more, that observe more, often are the ones that are able to get teams to go to the edge of the world because they know their people. And so they know how to get people to take a risk.
Yeah.
And they also are fantastic because they haven't maybe shamed people when they've got it wrong, because like innovation and creativity requires trust. And it's highly speculative. And so is our goals. All of our goals in the physical sense or in any adventures we choose, there is no clear determination if it's going to work out. If there was, we probably wouldn't do it because it would be set in stone as like a guarantee. A part of the growth is trying something where like maybe the odds are a little against you, or maybe it's like above a level of what you've done before. So in the unknown space, how do you know? And that is the same in all areas of our life when we seek to be bigger or be different.
Yeah, I think I really like this association of self and then the awareness of others. And then obviously that I 100% agree from the sort of leaning into their strengths. But unless there's that ability to pause and really slow down, I want to go back to that because I think
Oh, yeah,
the
this is a good
every
space.
single person that is really driving forward and seeing like they feel in control while doing great stuff has just got like a massive ownership of their role to play and stuff that even arguably might not even be entirely in their control. They're looking at what self-agency they have, right? So
Mm,
we're looking at, well, how is this my problem? Therefore, how can I find my solution? And I
yeah.
think just rebuilding that space of, well, this is a character building space. That was shit. What part did I play a role in? And then how can I fix this? And just under reinforce that into more problem solving spaces to then see the light through the trees a little bit of, okay, what self agency do I have here? Is a
Mm.
cool place to start. And I think I'm going to assume that you're going to tie this right back into journal questions and the ability to write that down. Am I right in saying that? Or
Yes and no. Like, yes, journaling helps. But if you're journaling in a frenetic space, you're probably going to write drivel. The biggest benefit I find is intentional pause and space. When you're operating in autopilot and from your default settings, It's very, very hard to make a change in how you can lead, how you can be for yourself. I've become a huge advocate of carving intentional, immersive, expansive space where the deliverables on you are pretty much nothing other than being. And it can be very hard for people to give what they feel is a luxury. And the reality is it's not a luxury. Like, because if you don't do it, the quality of your life diminishes and your relationship with other people get hugely impacted. We do these like immersive retreats at Her Trails. We like get groups of women and we do a couple in like kind of remote environments like the Lara Pinta. We're doing one in Bali next year, but we do in Tasmania as well. There's basically no technology, which is like everyone by the end wants to like burn their phone because they realize how good they feel when they're not on it. And it takes a while for the brain to shift. So we craft these like retreats, adventures, experiences, whatever you want to call them, where people can have that space to get down, connect down, but then to actually have this incredible conversation with these strangers that all of a sudden by the end of the 7 days, they are literally the best friends because everyone accepted them for exactly who they were, because everyone had the time to realize like the beauty of why people are the way they are. In our day-to-day lives, when someone's different or operates differently than you and it feels a bit jarring or you don't understand it, we don't create the time to like get to know why they are that way. And like on one of our retreats, someone, like I don't like to give too much information because sometimes people cling onto the information. And if it doesn't happen exactly that way, they feel like they didn't create success. And I'm like, no, like it's meant to be fluid. Anyway, this one woman came up to me and she's like, I need to know exactly what time I can go for a run. And I was like, oh, well, we actually are got hiking. It's not really about running, but, you know, and then I was trying to craft a bit of space for her to run. And I remember walking away and someone's like, oh God, she's quite intense. Like she needs to know when she has to run. And I just said to that person, I was like, I've done these trips enough that what I know is, whilst that might have previously seemed a bit annoying to me, like, just like go with the flow. The other part of me goes, there's a reason for that. A couple of days later, in a group share session, she shared that 1 month after she signed up for the retreat, her husband, and they have 6 children, all under like 8, unexpectedly passed away. And there she was. This was going to be now like the 6-month anniversary of him passing away. And to have survived with 6 children going through grief and trauma, her rigidity over getting her run in as the only small fraction of time that she had to herself was so, so important. And it's like, if you find that someone is a bit, I don't know, like intense about something or obsessive or like need details or is way too much with the flow, like if you give space and time and they feel safe to share the why for you, it's like people's connection and understanding of themselves and like just general humanity expands, which therefore means you can collaborate so well as a team because you give a shit about each other. Now, for the rest of the trip, it's not like she was this victim, which she most certainly didn't want to be. And she didn't share it straight away because she was, well, firstly, I think she was seeking safety and making sure that we were the right people to share it with. But she wanted to show up as not like a mum of 6 children and as a widow. She wanted to show up as her. And everyone kind of got that and made sure like they gave her the space to do that while still recognizing beautifully that she was going through something so enormous. And on the very last day, she got a massage and we made sure she had time to do that. But one of the women, who wasn't even in our facilitation team, found out where she was getting that massage, and she met her at the end of the session with a bottle of sparkling water because she knew she liked sparkling water, and like I think it was a bag of chips or something like that that she knew she liked because she'd learned about it throughout the week. And she was just there because she thought she finally had time to do something else for herself with none of us around, and maybe she would need to see a supportive face at the end of it. Actually, it's emotional thinking about it. Like when people get to be in space with each other and they truly have no objectives other than to just be a good human, they always rise, and that's intentional space. And people don't give it to themselves because they think it might be costly or they're indulgent or luxurious. But it's like the ripple effect to every single area of your life after pausing. It doesn't always have to be a week. It can literally be for a day, or it can be for an hour, whatever you can do. But yeah, I do it once a year. I make sure I have a because I craft a lot of experiences where people get to be intentional. And I used to think that was me being intentional, but no, I was still in the service of, so that wasn't me doing it.
Yeah.
I was like, shit, I caught myself in my own problem that I'm trying to help serve. And so now I try and do it too. And it's like, no one is perfect at this. Everyone needs help. It's why the coach has the coach. Like you said, you have a coach. I have a coach. It's because if we didn't have a coach, it means we didn't believe in the process of coaching.
Yeah. It just reinforces that space of continuing to be more curious, right? And I think, as you mentioned, what you've just said is what you suppress, you tend to express. And if there's that one thing that you hold on to, that's that one bit of certainty in a week that otherwise feels pretty unknown, you can start to see where that goes through. And I really love that example because we run retreats. We've got fantastic little spot in Bali that we do
Oh,
annually as well.
whereabouts?
I'll have to share some details with you. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, it's
I'd love to
the whole
see it.
week, and
Yeah.
they've
Maybe
been
it's a
amazing.
retreat I need to go to.
Yeah. But I think, as you said, when you're running the retreat, like I got the end of the 2 weeks, I'm like, I am done with people. I've been on the entire time. This was amazing, but like I'm worn
Yeah.
out. And you notice that you're constantly in that service space. But for the people in the group, as you said, I loved the ability to see the tricky people on day one, where I'm like, oh, I'm gonna watch you two, were the ones that by day three, day four, they'd gone through experiences together, they'd shared in the group, they'd felt like it was a safe space, they'd got away from their normal environment and patterns and behaviors, and the amount of awareness that by the time they got to day 5, day 6, they were like the core parts of the group. You were seeing this growth and development,
Oh,
and
yeah.
just so much on the way leaving. As you
Yeah.
said, that they're the biggest friends by the end of it.
Yeah. Everyone
uh
used to say to me, there's always a trouble person. And I'm like,
yeah,
bullshit. It's like, you're the trouble person then. Like,
yeah,
there doesn't have to be. It's like, if everyone gets to be themselves, like people are inherently good people if they feel safe.
yeah,
For them, that, they're not going to start like our retreats, they're not cheap. And it's because of the investment that everyone chooses to put in and because they're like very high touch with what they get. But a good piece of advice for you with how you said, like, I get it. Like it's exhausting kind of in the sense of you're not just on for the week, but in the lead up to it as well. And I like to really think about like, because women don't get spoiled. And so I really love to I overly think about the details because women often create details for other people, but they haven't been given it themselves. But what I have discovered, which could be good for you, is I don't need to be everything again. And the people who come on the trip actually can serve each other, which therefore means like I don't have to be in every conversation. Like I don't need to be in the moment where everyone has like these earth-shattering moments. Like they can be, or whatever it is, they can be with other people. And I've learned that actually sustains me to be better for them, but also be better for myself for the long run to keep doing it. So I don't I have at times had like, oh, that big exhaustion when I've gotten back, but I'm trying really hard to be like super present, a bit of grace on myself and also like remove ego. Like I am not everything. Like the relationships they will form with the people on this trip are actually the relationships that will serve them through the next chapter of their lives.
yeah, 100%. And obviously inside our community, we've got 10 or 11, 12 coaches now. So there's so much
Oh,
more
that's so cool.
focus around like I'm not the figure, and I see this with so many business owners as well, where being able to relinquish control, like logically might make sense, but once you see an event run without you, it hurts, right? And it's like
Oh,
going
yeah.
through that space to be like, wow, like other people can do the stuff and I can let control. And it ties back into exactly what we were saying, which is it actually becomes our problem because we're the one that can't let go of the control. On the retreat example, the biggest part for that was that it wasn't just one retreat. We ran two back to back and also met some people in between. So it was like 14 days, 15, 16 days of just on, which was funny because the space there was, as you mentioned, that pause, that ability to look at, yes,
Yeah.
performance, but recovery. And there was very little recovery. So it was looking at the big bit.
Oh, that's so, yeah, it's crazy. But I am catching myself these days where I'm like, okay, cool. Like I love what I do and I'm so passionate about it. But it's like I have to kind of practice what I preach as
Yeah.
well,
Yep.
personally, because you grow from it. But yeah, we seem like we have kind of like similar audiences, and New Zealand is a very special place. I told you before that I'm about to head off to New Zealand and do an expedition, and I haven't done one for a couple of years. And I feel like I'm actually really in a new season of my life right now, like personally and professionally. And this kind of adventure, like going across like a Transalpine traverse, I was past to Mount Cook and then like on gravel biking to Queenstown and then going up Ben Lomond. for me feels like my expansive space where
Yep.
it's going to be really hard because I haven't been able to train like I would normally do for a project like this because, my son just started at prep and like, it's amazing how much activities there is. And like, you want to prioritize all of those things and my business and all these wonderful things. But I'm like, it'll be challenging, but how freeing to have single-minded focus for 2 weeks. Like I don't get that in my everyday life, and how funny I have to craft an expedition to have it. But that's, we find the hacks in our life to get to our place of neutrality. And nature is incredibly restorative. They included as a driver for well-being recently time in green spaces. And they say you need to spend a minimum of 2 hours in green spaces per week to reap the benefit of that. Now, I live in like the Dandenong Ranges, so I look out my door and it's like trees all over the place.
Mm.
And so you don't actually have to run or walk or anything. You can actually just be in greenery to get that. And so people, it's like the most easiest hack out of all of them because you can have indoor plants or you can kind of tick it off as you are going for a walk with a dog or whatever it is. And I love that driver for well-being because it decreases the intensity in the central nervous system. And if you can own that one, it's amazing how the ripple effect to the other areas for well-being flourish.
Yeah, look, I've really enjoyed the amount of like there's an intellect that comes through, sure, but there's a level of awareness of how you operate and then how that ripple effect has on others, which I really like. I'd love to bring this back to the journal questions. I'm
Oh
getting
yeah, you
there
love it.
eventually.
Yeah, sorry, so sorry.
No,
Yeah.
the pause part was amazing, and I really like looking at that through like our version of that, or like a simple gateway to that, has been 5 deep breaths before a meal. Right, we look at this through the gut health space, and that has a pretty big impact on the digestion side of things. But it's a simple habit that's really easy to do, and a really easy habit not to do.
Yep.
It's just that pause. And yeah, dinner is maybe easy because you're already winding down, but like, can you do it at lunch, right? When you're right in the middle of all this stuff, can I take 5 deep breaths before a meal? And just that initial space of pause, I think is really helpful, even just to the retreat standpoint. All these go-getters wanted to come to exercise and get fit and do all these things. And like 90% of them, their biggest highlight was our more yin yoga stuff, right? Which was just slow them down, really get rid of all of that extra distraction, and just the way that they change that whole environment, I think is really cool. And I think that holding that space either for the pause or the journaling or some level of mindfulness becomes a really nice way to just bring it into. I'm a big fan of the retreats. And as you said, I think finding some version of a retreat, whether it's a weekend, a week, whatever, I think it's a really worthwhile pursuit. But I'm also a really big fan in making sure that you're not holding your breath until the holiday. You're creating those mini pauses or holidays throughout, which I think is what you're leading to as well. So the journal I look at, because I've seen a lot of people really struggle with the journal, even to the point that writing on a piece of paper would ruin the piece of paper because I might get it wrong and I could have written it better, right? We've got a sort of planner and journal that we use with our clients a lot as well. And the number one reason that people are not using the journal is because their day doesn't feel perfect enough to use the journal, right? So it's a really, really interesting spot to really break that down into getting rid of that judgment by writing things down. So my question really, I'll get rid of the runway, but what are your top 1 to 3 questions that you would get people to ask on a regular basis to build that awareness, maybe lean into a bit more discomfort around those patterns that keep coming through, or just bringing awareness to the patterns in the first place?
Okay, I would ask them to write down when you last faced a challenge, what were some of the responses that came up? Like, how did they respond to that situation? And whether it be, they cried, they got angry, they got defensive, like, or they were calm. Like, it's not always negative. Like, sometimes our defaults are awesome, but like, write them all down. And then I do like to think like we're all a leader, like we're a leader in like many different facets of our life. But I would say like, what if someone was to describe you as a leader, what would be the 3 words that you would like them to describe you as? And then you could write, if you were to be honest with yourself, what do you think the 3 words that they may describe you as? And so you've got kind of this like default settings of how you've responded, good, bad, and ugly, the kind of leader that you would love to be perceived as, the kind of leader that you think perhaps people see you as. I think it's actually really great to ask people to answer that third one for you, because sometimes we are fucking hard on ourselves and maybe they would say much better things and we've chosen the worst ones. So that's like part two to it. But then to go like, what is one thing I can do when things get bad that can anchor me to the version of the leader that I want to be? And whether it is before I respond in an email or pick up the phone, I'm going to think of it overnight. I'm just going to take the night and I'm maybe going to write, I'll get back to you. Like, because we feel like we live in this responsive world, if you feel like it's wrong to not respond, literally to write, hey, I need to think about this properly, give it some proper space. I'll get back to you tomorrow. And you've sent something short that acknowledges it, that you have the night to think about what is the better response. Or, maybe it's like, how do you create a circuit breaker? Like whatever it is, like everyone will have their own one. So I think that's a bit of an exercise that gives a real world example, gives a reflection opportunity, and gives even like an ability to communicate with people outside about how they see you.
Totally.
Like I'm a massive like journaler. I do a lot of workshops with corporate groups as well on default settings, invisible rules, crafting blueprints for going beyond your comfort, which I like to call extension, but also collaborative leadership. And so there's a lot.
Totally. I really like, there's two things I want to bring up. First one, that ability to reflect on how you see yourself and then how others do as well. So our version of that question has been, in this, if someone, stuffed up X, how would you reply to them? Or how would you support them in that time? And you'd say all these lovely things about how you'd be constructive and how you'd help. And then it would be okay, and how would you respond to yourself if that same thing had happened to you, right? And that usually becomes shit. Like I'm a lot harder on myself than I would be on others. And just bridging that gap a little bit, I think, is helpful. The second part, which I honestly think is a bit of a theme for today, is you've actually intentionally created a gap in your questions between where you are and where you'd like to be. And then you're allowing space to discover what that person will be and how you will get there. And I think just leaning into the uncertainty and leaning into the stories that you play to yourself, like just being able to really audit that space is a really nice way to make sure that we're in that space, I guess, of self-discovery, but you're also making sure you're not beating yourself up until you're there, right? And we're just in a spot where it's so easy to create the next thing, and I will be happy when. And I was listening to a podcast recently that said you've already achieved things that you said would make you happy.
Yeah.
And I think just yeah, exactly. You get to it and you get to the next thing, right? I always come back to a photo of, I had a bodybuilding show quite a while ago now, where I kind of won all the things I could on the day, and my face was just blank, cool, on to the next thing, right? Like zero pause to celebrate, pat in the back, whatever, move on, right? And I think so many people are in that spot, whatever sort of goals and dreams are there. There's I'll push this away because I need to achieve the thing. And then once I get there, I'm already on to the next thing because I expected that and I'm already looking for the next. And I think just that whole pause, that awareness, that ability to sit in the gap and realize that that's the exact spot that actually is the most enjoyable, right? Like once you're there, it's not that fun, but getting there could be an opportunity to be enjoyable, I think is a much better way to look at it.
Yeah, I love that. So funny now, you said before we started the potty, is there a certain area you want to go or not talk about? And I said like, no, it'll go where it'll go. And I just love that like podcast conversations are always so free flowing when you don't really have these questions.
Yep.
And like it gets to be like this current, like everything that we're speaking about is things that I'm thinking about so much right now. And if we'd had all these formulaic questions, like tell me when you did this race and what did that feel like? You'd be talking about things that are just not even relevant. Like the examples that come up are just rooted in like present reflection. So yeah, it's been lovely to have a chat with you.
Absolutely. Conversation's always better when you're not already waiting to ask the next question, but rather listening to what you're saying. And look, you've been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for sharing. I think just there's so much nuance in this, but for most people, and I'm definitely going to go back and rewatch this because in whatever pursuit you're currently in, we just create a lot of our own suffering for no reason. And being able to apply some of the principles that we've gone through with Sam is going to give you, hopefully, just a nicer way to talk to yourself and
Mm.
also achieve the thing, right? It's not about just feeling good now and letting go of it all. You can achieve the things and probably a lot more by actually enjoying the process. So that's a really nice nugget. I think we've tied it into physically what changes our body's going through, mentally what challenges we're approaching and choosing to go into, and everything in between. So thank you so much for your time, and I thoroughly enjoyed it on my side.
Well, pleasure. Thank you.